Hey, it's Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up with Unit 11, the Cold War, and look at lesson number 5, post-war America's domestic policy. And we're talking domestic policy, we're talking about those policies that affect us right here at home. We're not talking about a relationship with other countries around the world, we're talking about what's happening right here. What we're going to do, of course, is we're going to pick up with the unit focus question, and just as we always tell you, unit focus questions are to guide our lessons as we go through this particular unit. We won't answer it right now, but we will look at both of them at the end of the unit. The first question is, what effect did the Cold War have on the United States and its relationship with other nations around the world? And number 2, describe American prosperity during the post-World War II period. Our vocabulary, we have academic vocabulary and content vocabulary, just as we always tell you. Take out your journals, write these terms down and define them yourself, and we'll try to address as many of them as we can as we go through the lesson. The lesson focus questions. Now, unlike the unit focus questions, we will answer the lesson focus questions at the end of the lesson. We have 2 questions we want to consider. What contributions did Truman make to American prosperity during the post-World War II 1950s? What contributions did Eisenhower make to the American prosperity during the post-World War II 1950s? So with that, we'll start with our Do Now activity. Take out your journals, of course, write down the topic that you see. It says, have you ever heard of the GI Bill? And if so, what does it provide to America's veterans? So at this time, we'll take a few minutes and we will go through and give you an opportunity to respond. The GI Bill, commonly called or sometimes called by its proper name, the Services Readjustment Act, and what it was created for was to help American veterans who returned home from fighting in the war, not just World War II, of course, but in future wars. When they return home after active duty, it gives them an opportunity, of course, to enjoy some benefits, like to be able to get low-cost housing loans, to be able to get opportunities, of course, to go to college and get degrees. So when you look at the GI Bill, what it basically did, it is something, of course, that is reserved for American veterans to reward them for their service in protection of this country. So the GI Bill, or the GI Bill of Rights. I know you got that correct. All right, Truman's Fair Deal. Now, we talked about domestic prosperity during Eisenhower and Truman's presidency. Truman won the close election in 1948. Matter of fact, it was real close. Truman didn't even think that he would win the election in 1948. And matter of fact, a couple of papers, at least one paper, printed a headline, about him losing. So he didn't think, well, a lot of people, maybe he thought he did, but a lot of people didn't think he would win the election in 1948, but to his credit, he did. So his plan was called the Fair Deal, and it was an extension of FDR's New Deal. Now, if you have to remember now, Truman was the vice president, of course, under FDR, who created the New Deal. All right, the components of the Fair Deal included the following things: an extension of civil rights, like voting protections for African Americans, abolish the poll tax, and make lynching a federal crime. A lot of people don't know this about Truman, but Truman also desegregated the military. During World War II, white troops and black troops, of course, fought in segregated units. In Korea, they fought together for the first time in desegregated units. It increased Social Security benefits, raised the minimum wage, create low-income housing, and create national health insurance. Those were some of the goals, in the Fair Deal. Not all of them realized, but those were some of the goals, of course, in the New Deal. Truman's presidency was successful, turning back America to a prosperous peacetime economy. The early prosperity of the 1950s could be tied to Truman's Fair Deal and the Services Readjustment Act, or what we call the GI Bill. All right, here is the Chicago Daily Tribune. We were telling you that there was at least one paper that predicted that, of course, that Truman would lose the election in 1948, and the Chicago Daily Tribune is now famous for this photograph, or excuse me, this photograph that, of their national headline that said that Dewey defeats Truman. Now, we haven't had a president by the name of Dewey, so that would give you an indication, of course, that didn't happen, even though the Chicago Daily Tribune predicted that he did win. Truman refuses to run in 1952. Now, he didn't run in 52 because he didn't think he could win. And one of the biggest reasons why he didn't run in 52 is because of the unpopularity that, the popularity hit that he took with firing, Douglas MacArthur, who wanted to increase American involvement in the Korean War. And we'll talk about that at a later time. Truman refused to run during the election in 1952, though he had some accomplishment. He could have run on like the passage of the 22nd Amendment, which gave us term limits. That's one of the things that's currently in the news today about increasing the amount of terms, of course, that a president can run. Now, if you remember, FDR ran for 4 terms, elected to 4 terms. After FDR and the 22nd Amendment, no other president, of course, could serve or be elected to 4 terms. So desegregated the American military, the extension of Social Security, but perceived failures with containment, like China falling to communism, the Soviets creating the hydrogen bomb, growing opposition from Southern Democrats like the Dixiecrats, and U.S. involvement in the Korean War, ultimately convinced Truman that he couldn't win in 1952. Now, he did some good things as president, but because of all these other things, especially with China, becoming communist, and because of the Soviets developing the hydrogen bomb, Americans wanted more security, and they felt like that the Republican candidate, who was Eisenhower, would be a better, fit for America. Eisenhower's modern republicanism. Eisenhower, the former Allied commander in Europe in World War II, was elected as a Republican president in the election of 1952 by a landslide, with the Republican controlling the House and the Senate in the Congress. Eisenhower's modern republicanism promoted these 4 things: reestablishment of limited government with conservative principles, reduced spending, reducing the size of the military, and curbing the scope of the New Deal era programs like the TVA and RSC. His idea was to return America to Republican conservative values: small government with little interference, of course, in business, and less dependence, American dependence, of course, on New Deal programs. The Eisenhower administration brought domestic peace and prosperity, extended Social Security benefits, and created America's interstate system with Federal Highway Act, and also created the St. Lawrence Seaway to link the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. One of the big things that comes out of Eisenhower's time as President of the United States of America is the creation of America's interstate system with the Federal Highway Act. Now, one of the things as the commander, of course, in Europe that Eisenhower was very impressed with was the German road system. And because of that, German road system, what he envisioned was America having an interstate system, of course, that went from north to south and, of course, from east to west. And that was able to be accomplished by the U.S. government with the Federal Highway Act. All right, what we're going to do is look at this brief activity. And this activity, of course, is a Venn diagram that we want you to, of course, to address. And it's fair deal versus modern republicanism. The things that made them different and the things, of course, that made them alike. So what we'll do now is take a few minutes and give you the opportunity, of course, to look at that particular Venn diagram, and you can access it, of course, in the video description. And we'll come back in a few minutes and find out what you thought. Well, when you look at fair deal versus modern republicanism, now one of the obvious things is when you look at the size of government. Truman believed in big government. Well, government, of course, does more for people, and Eisenhower, of course, in limited government. So one of the biggest differences, of course, is in terms of looking at the role of government. Fair deal advocated for a more active role in ensuring social welfare. Modern republicanism promoted a limited government approach. Economic philosophy emphasized the government intervention in the economy to protect workers and provide services. Modern republicanism favored free market principle and believed in stimulating the economy through private enterprise. In other words, it's here. These are all the things, of course, that make them different. And then the only similarities are very few. Both initiatives aim to address societal needs and improve the lives of Americans, albeit through different methodologies, and both recognize the importance of civil rights, although the emphasis and execution varied. So when you look at fair deal and modern republicanism, we're talking about two opposing viewpoints, because you have two opposing philosophies: a Democratic conservative on the one side with Eisenhower, a Republican conservative on one side with Eisenhower, and a social democrat on the other side, of course, with Truman. All right, that gets us to our 2 lesson focus questions for Unit 11, Lesson 5. What contributions did Truman make to American prosperity during post-war WWII 1950s, and what contributions did Eisenhower make to American prosperity during the post-WWII 1950s? Well, when we look at those answers, it's quite similar in some cases in that they both proceeded over a period in the history of the United States of America where we were very, very prosperous. What did Truman do? He created a fair deal to provide Americans with increased Social Security benefits, a higher minimum wage, and creating a more low-income housing and establishing rent subsidies, which is good things. What contributions did Eisenhower make to American prosperity during the post-World War II 1950s? He instituted modern republicanism by ending what he called creeping socialism. He limited American government involvement in business, curbing the use of New Deal programs, and extended Social Security benefits. So both of them successful in their own right. All right, that gets us to the end of Lesson 5 on the Cold War, and we were talking about, of course, post-war America's domestic policy, and we looked at a Democrat with Truman and a Republican, of course, with Eisenhower. Both approaches were different, but both of them had similar results when it comes to economic prosperity during the post-war period. Once again, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. And as I always tell you, don't take my word for it. Do your own research and draw your own conclusions. And with that, we'll see you next time.